Today I'm celebrating Independence Day in the United States, which is something that I have scratched my head around for a long time. What I make of the United States, it's such a long and complicated story. It's very difficult to kind of know what aspect of it to really highlight. So I can just share what I make of it, all the study that I've done of the United States over the years, how I understand its importance in the context of world history. Because for me, Independence Day, it's triumphed as having been the day that the Americans managed to break off from the control of the United Kingdom and to say goodbye to the aristocracy. It was the result of the Civil War that finally vanquished the British controlling powers that had managed to still keep an influence on the United States long after these people had set off in boats from Europe with the sole and clear purpose of getting away from that system of ingrained aristocracy and exploitation that they were fleeing from Europe. So America became this land of opportunity where there wasn't a controlling government and where there was the opportunity to start again, the possibility of living a life free on the land without that influence, without that demand for taxation that was coming from the landed gentry, the royalty of the time. Now, all sorts of things happened in the process of people arriving. It seems to me that there were peaceful and amicable relationships between the Europeans and the indigenous people of the Americas in some places. For some time, there were clearly beautiful communities that were established there. New England, as I understand it, has a huge population of congregationalist churches, of people that live in contact with nature and live peaceful, beautiful lives that had very high levels of education and really embodied, they really saw the New England as the new opportunity to live life in a way that was wholesome and loving and beautiful and fair, and the systems of justice that grew up out of that time and place were incredible. But then of course also the Europeans brought diseases that caused goodness knows what problems for the indigenous population, and there was finally war and exploitation, and the story of building this land of liberty and the land of the free in a place where so much harm was done, not just to the geographical location, but the people that lived there. It's a real blot on the copybook of America. But I don't judge that because I'm not close enough to be able to understand what went on. And when you're talking about such huge numbers of people moving over periods of time, of course, so much of the development of America was based on the importation of slaves. But then slavery has been the backbone to civilization all across the world for thousands of years, so I don't want to single them out as being the sole perpetrators, because everybody has enslaved everybody through the course of time. What I thought was very special about America, and why I think it still has an important role to play, is basically the Constitution and the thought that went into it. This post-Enlightenment desire to create a land where the power for government to be exploited was undermined by its very constitution. Now, Britain does have a constitution of sorts spread out over different documents, but this was, as I understand it, the first time that this was really enshrined in a legal document for what they're worth. But it was a statement of intent for a country to embody a way of being that was about rightful living, appreciating everybody's independent and individual sovereign right to determine their life in the pursuit of happiness. It's a really incredible experiment. And most culture evolves and has evolved throughout time organically from the ground up. It's just been a phenomenon that arrives out of the people that live in a particular locality. So America was weird because it was a load of people moving to a place to establish a culture, and then through a document trying to assert what that culture should look like. It's a strange child of human beings, the United States. Not that I've visited, not that I've seen it firsthand, but I have like enormous compassion for the people that have been embroiled in that experiment for the last few hundred years, and it's still playing itself out. It's still not clear to see how much of a success or what kind of success that is. I mean, clearly in the United States, the problems with obesity and health, and it doesn't look as if the experiment is going that well, and yet I still triumph that spirit of independence and self-determination. That seems to me to make a lot of sense. Now, how independent the United States is another whole question, because when you look into the history of the civil wars and the periods of time that went in between them and the connections with the banking system, it turns out that the wars that were being fought were, as always, bankers' wars and tussles going on between who was going to control the money supply and whether or not people were going to get to use real currency and not fiat currency. And so like the cry for independence and the papers that were signed didn't actually assure independence in quite the way that we imagine it did. Perhaps the monarchy was no longer officially recognised, and yet the flag is still made of red, white and blue, and there are tendrils that are connecting the United States to the banking dynasties of the world that are not immediately visible. So are they independent? Were they independent? Was that independence anything worth shouting about? It's a very complicated question that I don't have any answers about. All I feel I can do is watch and observe and see how things transpire in the coming decades. It does seem to be on the cusp of great transition. I'm really delighted to see Robert Kennedy Jr. being able to exert the influence that he is, and that there's definite possibility that the health of Americans can make a comeback, and who's to see what's going to transpire in the coming years. But today I wish to join in the celebrations of July the 4th and Independence Day, honouring the spirit of freedom and individual sovereignty.